And we are live. Welcome everybody to the first KT for Democracy webinar. This is focusing very much on our use cases. And my name is Joanna Hearn. I'm the communications lead for the project. And I'm going to hand over straight away now to Jennifer Edmond, who's going to introduce the project to you all. You're all extremely welcome. We have both the chat and the question and answer box open down below. Please use them. And if you have any problems during the webinar, just write to myself. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Joanne, and thanks everyone for attending today. My name is Jennifer Edmond. I am the overall coordinator of the KT4D project, and I'm an associate professor of digital humanities, which I'll come to in a minute, based in Trinity College in Dublin. Now, I'm going to share my screen so that you are able to follow along with me. So you can see now that I've kind of subtitled this introduction to our use cases, which is what we'll be focusing on today. Again, there's many different things going on in the project, but today's focus is on how we're engaging with our communities. So thinking about this as a way of connecting cultures and including our users. And so one of the ways that I think it's really useful to begin an understanding of how the KT4D project may be a little bit different from other projects you might be aware of in the space of AI, big data, and democracy, which is the sort of the way we describe the sort of the larger field we're playing in, is that we really felt that it was important for there to be a project approaching these issues from the perspective of the underappreciated centrality of culture for technology adoption. And if you think about it, we think a lot about the economics of technology adoption, or maybe certain players, certain industries or sectors that are important. But if you look at my little word cloud there, you'll see that a lot of what happens with technology and a lot of what we see about the way it interacts with civic participation and democratic practices has to do with these aspects of cultures, the way we speak, the things that we enjoy in terms of culture and cultural participation, the way we view ourselves from the perspective of our past, the way we have performances, both in the sense of a kind of an artistic performance we may enjoy and draw aspects of our identity from, but also in the way that we play certain roles. And there's many, many ways in which culture is essential to the way in which we either do or don't find ways of using these advancing knowledge technologies in a very productive way for our democratic societies. However, it's important that we think of them as knowledge technologies. Now, there are a number of different definitions of knowledge technologies, many of which are not particularly useful for what we're talking about today. But we think of knowledge technologies as things that emerge at the intersection of cultural sense-making practices and engineered objects, and that they bring new affordances and constraints to these processes, and there is a sort of a back and forth between them. So let me unpack that a little bit, because it's a little bit of a big sentence. So if you think about the way in which we have cultural practices around communication, around how we interpret what we see, about how we create and how we express an identity through creation. Knowledge technologies have always played a role in helping us to enhance those capacities, but at the same time may also make us a little worried at times when a new technology comes as to what the effect is going to be. So if you think about it, the typewriter had an effect on how we were able to write. And of course, there was concern that this was going to have a negative effect. But of course, it's been assimilated and of course surpassed now. If you think about early cinema, people were afraid of the Lumiere brothers' train as it appeared on the screen. And this to me speaks of a kind of a visual literacy that we're now going to have to develop in the era of deep fakes. If you think about the telephone, early telephones had party lines. So we had this sort of different sense of how our communications may or may not be private. And all of these capacities we've developed over time, ways of filtering our interactions, our beliefs, our images, our symbols, our artifacts, through what we do and through what we have in terms of technologies, all of these capacities are going to have to be transferred now into the age of AI and big data. Otherwise, we have great risks in terms of social and cultural instability. So what we're doing in KT4D is we're addressing these rapid changes and finding out how we think they can be capitalized upon to foster a more inclusive civic participation in democracy. We are developing tools, guidelines, and a digital democracy lab, which I'll speak to you about in a second. And we're creating these results that we are going to validate across these 3 user needs scenarios that are in 4 different cases. And the 4 different use cases are building capacity for citizens and citizen-facing civil society organizations, creating regulatory tools and services for policy and CSOs, and improving awareness as to how to design ethically and mindfully for democratic principles. And you'll hear more about this in a second. But before I turn to my consortium colleagues, I'll tell you a little bit about that consortium and a little bit about what we're creating before we move into the use cases per se. So as I mentioned, the coordination for this project is in Trinity College Dublin, and we have a number of partners who are bringing communications expertise, Trust IC and Compla, who are bringing research expertise, EARMers, Demos, CIBER Voluntario, Strain, Beyond the Horizon, Hybrid Core, ICT Legal, DEMSOC, and Warwick are all coming together to provide, in some cases, knowledge of users, in some cases, knowledge of the kind of social context. Again, some of these partners are actually CSOs rather than universities or research performing organizations. And of course, very specific expertise in ICT development and the legal aspects of what we're planning to do. So looking quickly, you'll see here at the top line, we have the use cases, which you'll hear lots about from the next speakers. But also, I wanted to introduce you to our key exploitable results, our KERs. We have a social risk toolkit, which is going to really be a set of reports that look into these cultural risks. We have a governance framework and policy roadmap, which is going to actually be pointed more towards the policymakers. And we have this digital democracy lab. Now, the digital democracy lab, you'll see, covers all 3 of the use cases. And this is going to be an experience of collective sense-making around the intersection of democracy and these advanced big data and AI tools. We're going to have some educational tools, narrative-based simulation game, and 2 interactive explainers talking about big data and AI respectively. And then finally, we're going to have a social computing compass, a more culturally embedded tool for the exploration of the ethics of software design. They'll be facing more into the computer science and software development audiences. So that is the extent of what I wanted to say, because I think the real excitement in this is when we turn over to our colleagues to actually go into these use cases and how specifically we're engaging with the audiences that are most important for these outcomes and for this project. So I'm going to turn first to Anna Bjork, who comes to us from Demos, and who will be talking about the KT4D use case in Brussels, which is around the ideas of regulatory tools and services for policy and CSOs.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And I have the classical question for you. Can you see my screen? And I hope so that you can, and that you can hear me as well. So it's now my pleasure to talk to you more about use case 1, which, as it says, will be in Brussels. And I'll talk about it more concretely towards the end. But first of all, here's the team that we will be working on the use case with me. No slides are, yes. So as Jennifer said, I'm Anna Björk. I'm research area lead here at Demos Helsinki, and I've got background in conceptual history. I'm currently working on how technological transformation are changing social contracts. Then I'm joined by my colleague Atte Ojanen, who's research manager and also a doctoral researcher here at Demos. And he focuses especially on how to govern emerging technologies democratically. And finally, the third member of our team is Johannes Anttila, who is a senior expert at Demos Helsinki, and whose expertise lies especially on socio-technical imaginaries, underlying technological development, and digital governance. So first, about the idea behind the use case. So the core idea here would be that to understand how better deal with the challenges and potential of AI and big data in our societies, we will be needing close interaction with policymakers and decision makers who has their kind of everyday jobs think about the societal level implications of emerging technologies. And here I really like to emphasize the word interaction, as it is at the heart of the KT4D project, as Jennifer already pointed out, to deliberately look across stakeholder groups and to translate these different angles into research results, possibly also in the course of the project. So we would like to ensure that we stay in the loop with the other use cases, because we're working on this more top-down approach. And at the background of working with policymakers and decision makers on this is the idea that problems generated by these emerging technologies, such as centralization of power, opacity, and the speed of change inherent to the current AI advances, all generate this risk to democracy, as noted, and that indeed we need to think carefully about the role of governance at national, supranational, and global levels when we're designing governance accordingly. So the idea is that new digital technologies are increasingly changing governance debates to the extent that questions of regulation and governance of technologies, as well as question of how technologies themselves govern, need to be discussed and answered as well. The leading question we try to address in this use case is therefore, how can and should European policymakers regulate the disruptive nature of general purpose AI democratically? So as is well known, the EU has been quite active in generating new policy and regulation for AI and data within recent years. And it has brought about such pieces of legislation as GDPR, Data Act, and AI Act, for example. At the same time, however, there are guidelines and national level legislative initiatives being introduced and developed, such as the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI in Canada, the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, IDA resources, OECD has developed their AI principles, UK has a white paper on AI regulation, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of discourse going around. And the EU is therefore at an interesting point in time when it comes forming its own kind of technology political poise globally. And so far it seems that it's been driven by the attempt to do so while building on the distinctive features on democracy, human-centeredness, and transparency, as well as ethics. This is made even more interesting by the fact that we'll be soon having a batch of new members of the European Parliament elected in spring, and therefore also potentially updated goals for the technology politics and policy. And another interesting feature, I think, when it comes to timing of this project and our work here, is of course that we'll be soon looking at the implementation phase of this new regulation. So it'll be interesting to see what's happening when all that comes into play at national levels. So to get to our kind of leading question, which was about how can and should EU and so on and so forth regulate, we will be looking at how to identify central questions underlying AI governance, and also to try to make these underlying emerging principles and priorities identifiable. So the use case seeks to engage these policymakers to foster more kind of holistically informed regulatory processes. So AI systems do not undermine, but actually empower democratic participation. As a specific outcome, the use case will be developing a governance framework, as was indicated already by Jennifer. And this governance framework will build upon these existing AI governance and algorithmic accountability guidelines to kind of support this democratic and trustworthy use of AI, taking into account these fundamental rights and also algorithmic bias. And it'll be critical to evaluate how these democratic values, such as equality, transparency, and privacy, are realized in these algorithmic systems. But this is, of course, like an endeavor for the future, because we're not, it's not exactly ready yet, because the use case is only beginning. But the governance framework and also the policy roadmap and the further recommendations which will be complementing it will be a combination of the kind of background research that we do in this project, and also this use case one in Brussels, which will be then bringing these European policymakers and CSOs working closely on AI governance together. We try to, through this framework, to provide an easy guide to the kind of assessment of democratic risks when regulating AI in the context of these European values. And hopefully this will be kind of, this could be used as to protect citizens from the possible negative impacts of these technologies on fundamental rights and democracy. I have to say that while, of course, we hope that the European citizens will be great beneficiaries of this framework, the overall kind of the main audience for this framework is the policymakers, as I mentioned, the CSOs working on this AI policy. So the goal of the first workshop, which we will be holding in a couple of weeks, is to identify the blind spots and gaps in the current regulatory approach to AI in Europe, especially with respect to democratic values such as transparency. And on the slide, you can see like an overall collection of different questions that keep flying around when we think about this use case. But we will be asking in the workshop, for example, is the use case and product legislation approach kind of enshrined in the AI Act fit for purpose in this age of opaque general purpose AI systems? And also, should there be restrictions on the development of increasingly larger models? As said, we will be organizing 3 roundtables with policymakers, think tanks, and CSOs to keep this going throughout the project. And sorry, yes, this is the final one. So this is a bit of an advertisement because it's still an upcoming event. Please do sign up if you feel like this would be the perfect event for you. And we hope that the participants, you could gain a better understanding of the EU's AI governance landscape, but also to be a part of a kind of a growing expert community on the future of AI regulation in Europe. And there's, like I said, there's still time to sign up for the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. That was a fantastic overview of the work you're doing towards the use case in Brussels. So we switch now to a slightly different perspective. Again, I think it's very important in the project to address users where they are and in terms that make sense to them. So I'm going to turn now to Andrés del Álamo Cienfuegos, who is with our partner in Madrid, Fundación Cibervoluntarios, and we'll be talking about the use case we're running in Madrid, capacity building services for citizens and citizen-facing CSOs. And if you have any questions, either for Anna or for Andrés or for any of the speakers as we go along, please use the Q&A. We'll come to questions at the end. Andrés, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here, giving you an idea of what we are going to do in Madrid, together with our partners in Poland that you will hear from soon as well. So let me share you my screen, and so you can have a better idea of what do we have in mind for use cases 2 and 3, which are kind of in the same package, because we are doing these use cases together with our partners in Poland. First, let me introduce myself and the organization I represent. My name is Andrés del Álamo Cienfuegos. I do work for Fundación Cibervoluntarios. I'm a digital anthropologist. I work as user researcher and also project manager for EU projects. My expertise is around how do people understand technology, and how do people understand technology in different cultures and contexts. So it couldn't be more pertinent in this situation, because we are thinking on how do people understand AI, how do people understand big data and other knowledge technologies. The organization I am with is Cibervoluntarios, which is it's an NGO, and with more than 208,000 volunteers all across Spain and 1,700 entities. So we do provide with normally training about digital literacy and digital technologies to schools, other NGOs, municipalities of small and rural areas, daycare centers. we have a lot of implementation in our country, and we have been for more than 20 years also doing UX research, which is user experience research for European projects. Both these things will be relevant for what we have to do in the use case of Spain. So what is this use case and what are the objectives of it? So as part of the objectives of the KT4D project is to develop educational materials and video games centered around critical digital literacy and knowledge technologies. What does this mean? Well, this means that departing from what people or how people do conceptualize these knowledge technologies, then we will create educational materials aimed for very different contexts and also in the form of games. So we, let's say, continue in the or we understand the dynamics that people are following already into integrating and facing these technologies into their life and cultural context. The objective of the sessions of these use cases are two. First one is to identify what do people think about knowledge technologies and the most advanced technologies such as AI, for example, or big data, as we said. From those ideas, so from seeing which are the biggest concerns and which are the biggest, let's say, hypes of people towards these technologies, we will center the topics of our educational materials and games around these topics, around these concepts. And then we will put these citizens to test already existing materials, already existing games, already existing educational materials to see if the format is adequate for them, to see what people do like more. Do they prefer videos? Do they prefer more, let's say, structure, unstructured? So we want to see content and format of these outcomes. Our use case is already organized. It's going to be in the 31 of October of 2023 in La Casa Encendida of Madrid. La Casa Encendida is it's a fantastic cultural center in the center of Madrid, and it would consist of half the event of, well, research for me, but let's say discussion and co-creation for the people who will be involved. Who will participate in our event? Well, this is an interesting question because our methodology is going to follow qualitative criteria, but we are going to follow qualitative criteria in a serious and sensible game. So drawing from the question that we want to answer, we want to know what are the thoughts and opinions of different kinds of people around digital technologies. Then we select what's most important, and what's most important is the digital literacy that these people have, so the knowledge of technology that these people already possess, the participation in politics in general, the interest about politics, and this is normally well represented, or there is a lot of literature that support the fact that this goes distributed among ages groups. So seniors, young adults, and middle-aged group. From these groups, we will select a small sample of participants that have already, let's say, accomplished these important issues that we want to cover. And from there, we will do a 30 people session split into two groups of 15. As you will probably see in Poland, this format will be a little bit different, but kind of similar, very similar. And in these two groups of 15, there will be a representation of seniors, of younger people, also from, let's say, from more general population, let's go like this, and people who are more and less interested in politics. That's what we want. So the first part of this use case will be, as I said, research and concept exploration. So people will receive before the session a warm-up questionnaire in which we will ask them very simple questions such as, do you know what big data is? Do you know what AI is? Can you give us an example? So as when we enter into let's say the focus groups that we're going to do after, we do not, let's say, depart from zero, and we do not have to, let's say, put people in the mood, but that people know what are we going to talk about. However, we will address the results of these questionnaires, and we will start addressing the gap that there might be in knowledge of these technologies. From there, we want to dynamize this focus group on threats, but also opportunities that knowledge technologies provide to democracy. And we want to know what are the opinions of people on these matters? How do they think of them? If is there any generational gap, and why is there this generational gap? And what do they think as the most important and the most relevant of these knowledge technologies? Because there are many examples of how technology affect democracy, and we are going to touch most or some of them, but we want to know which one triggers people the most, so we can center our efforts into these matters. Then there will be, of course, after our break, this will be a long session and a fun one, I expect, a validation round of already existing video games and educational materials that are about these kind of topics. So users will split in small groups and sit down in small tables and test these games and materials and tell us our opinion. We will be with them, and we will be kind of gathering this information. The objective, as said, is to explore the formats for those games. So as in here, you can see some of the, let's say, games or materials there is. So for example, this one in which we say that there is one of these photos refers to a material that is more like, let's say, knowledge, more classical, kind of like you learn and then you pass a test. Then there are games, mostly indie games, that are on the topic of surveillance, are on the topic of, let's say, they put you in the shoes of someone who's surveilling or someone who's managing data, and they give us, or they put us in front of important questions that we can let's say explore through these formats. There is also formats of videos or of materials that are more video or documentary formats. So we have a big range, a big toolkit of them to show them to people, to citizens. And then the last step will be a co-creation workshop. So the participants will, let's say, draft and sketch games and educational materials and imagine together these educational materials in a paper, or that depends. And the idea for us is to have a down-to-earth material to start our creative work. That's been all from my side. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please go ahead.
And thank you so much, Andres. Just so we know that I see that there is a question for you, but again, as I mentioned, we'll come to the questions at the end. Please, if you're in the audience and have a question, use our Q&A in order to make sure that we can go through those at the end of the presentation. We're now going to turn to our second use case facing citizens directly. You may wonder why there are two, but we felt that coming from a cultural perspective, we couldn't expect every region and every culture and every language in Europe to be the same. So I'd really like to turn over now to Bogna Gawronska-Nowak, who is from the Institute of Urban and Regional Development in Warsaw, who'll be talking about the use case there, again, about capacity building services for citizens and citizen-facing CSOs. Bogna, are you with us?
Yes, hello.
Okay.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Jennifer.
And you can share your screen and go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, I hope it's visible.
I think you just need to go to full screen. Perfect.
Yep. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer, for introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I would like maybe to present first my team and the institution, my institution. So we are multidisciplinary specialists that are exploring urban studies. This is the institute that has two offices in Krakow and in Warsaw. And in fact, among various, I would say, skills that we have, because we're really very multidisciplinary, We very much specialize in citizen science approach, and my department that I'm head of is your data department, data science department. We are social scientists, and we do very much applied social science. I am glad actually that I can share with you the real life results, because we just conducted the pilot of our use case that happened last Friday. So I'm glad that I can share very hot, I would say, results that we obtained. So we had a pilot in which 8 participants took part. The group was quite diversified in terms of age, education, professional experience. Well, it lasted half a day. And in fact, the 2 main purposes of this pilot was to, number one, define, describe the perception of AI. That was the very first part of this pilot. And the second part of the pilot was devoted to a co-creation process. So in fact, very much in line with what Andres has said about how are we going to approach towards use case. So we simply run the whole, I would say, procedure, assumptions, research assumptions that we already made, the common methodological framework. Well, you can see the photos show the results of the work of our participants. In fact, the discussion was very vivid, and we very actually pleased with the results. Sometimes it was a bit surprising for us. So first of all, what I can say that, these participants proved to have quite advanced understanding of AI. As you might see, the definition that, I managed to scratch, the definition of AI that they gave was in fact quite close to the one that you can find probably in literature, in the official definition. So mainly people were talking about AI as performing some tasks automatically, something that utilizes large data sets and algorithms to organize information and mimics human abilities. And we also found out that, they're quite familiar with various tools that AI has. I must also tell you that just before we started the whole focus group, the whole research, we ran a very simple, I would say, exercise. We asked them to tell us in a very simple vote whether they have a negative, positive, or neutral attitude towards AI. And I must tell you that the dominating emotion was positive. Well, it has a kind of, I would say, continuation, that judgment, because then we ask them to answer that question once again at the very end, and then it revealed us that in fact the way that they assess, judge emotionally AI depends on the time perspective that they adopt. So it turned out that at the very beginning, they were thinking about AI like about something that is happening right now. After a kind of simulation, or when we ask them to imagine what might happen, what are the scenarios in upcoming 10 years, and we ask again, what is the emotional attitude? Well, I must say that the emotional assessment evaluation was a bit more negative. Okay, so looking at how they perceive, again, continuing with that perception study. And so when we ask them how they perceive various tools, AI tools, again, it was confirmed that they are quite familiar with various forms of AI, like facial recognition or ChatGPT, the internet, certainly deep fakes. And when they were describing what are the attitudes towards those tools, it seemed that mostly they are mixed. There are mixed feelings about it, and in a quite well-defined way, they formulated some threats that would mainly refer to the data privacy problem, and they also observed that internet, for example, can show or is based on one-sided algorithms. So I guess it was quite visible that a majority of the threats, commonly I would say defined and understood, actually were quite well present in the descriptions that our participants gave. Then we asked them to define those threats and opportunities and challenges connected to AI, referring to well-defined focus areas like healthcare, work, education, entertainment, politics, society. And as you might guess, again, the diagnoses concerning AI were quite, I would say, mixed. Definitely not only negative or positive, but mixed. And again, the reference that they gave was given to a well-defined, objectively existing problems like unemployment, poverty, as a kind of result, some political circumstances, democracy. But again, it was not only negative, it was also positive, like it may give a new chance to, for example, a healthcare system, better diagnosis of some disease. Now, this co-creation part, in fact, what we asked them to do, we told them to imagine some escape room in which they need to actually have one quiz or one exercise, something that they could design for this escape room and propose it as something that could be used for AI better understanding. So before actually we ran that escape room exercise, and we asked them to co-design one tool, one thing that could be used in this escape room, we asked them about preferable communication method, how they actually find out using internet what they are find as something reliable, well-defined source of information. And we found out that the format that they would actually see as valuable should be very diversified. They would appreciate high level of interactivity, as well as they mentioned that for them it's really important who is actually delivering the message. And they said that it should be an expert, yes, indeed, but it would be nice if this expert would be well recognized as a person in a certain environment, like, for example, among young people, somebody who is, for example, a hero of the videos or internet community. Well, anyway, I must say that the mixed group structure, I mean, the elderly people together with young people, they had a fantastic feedback together, and finally, it was very visible that the diversified group works perfectly okay together. And I guess that this is the creative environment that really can contribute in the co-creation process. So what we came up with, and this is the very final slide, is something that I would call the adversarial collaboration model. So the younger participants had a chance to put themselves in the shoes of elderly and vice versa. And that was really a constructive dialogue and creative thinking and collaboration mode. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bogna. Wow, it sounds like that was a great pilot workshop. We look forward to hearing about the continuation. Now we turn to a different frame of reference, and specifically towards the use case in Dublin, which is about improving self-awareness in academic and industrial software development. And the presenter will be my own colleague, Dr. Eleonora Lima from Trinity College, Dublin. Eleonora, in your own time, feel free to share your slides and begin your presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let me share it. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm glad to end the overview of the use cases for KT4D, and I'm going to present use case 4, which is designed to interact with software developers working in the field of AI and big data in industry and academia. And the goal of use case 4 is to improve software developers' awareness of how to design tools, systems, and software that follow and implement democratic principles and support human flourishing and civic participation. The 3 workshops planned for use case 4 will all take place in Dublin, and they're going to be run and organized by Trinity College Dublin, specifically by Jennifer, myself, Eva Power, and Emma Clark from ADAPT, which is a research center for AI-driven technologies coordinated also by Trinity. But what are the challenges that we want to address in use case 4? The call for a human-centric and democratic AI and the need for software developers to follow and implement ethical guidelines and regulation is a highly debated topic. And it has become even more pressing since last year with the release of GPT-3 and 4, which raised public concern around the ethical repercussion of large language model and AI-powered systems more in general. However, regardless of media and public attention, and regardless of the efforts from governments and regulatory bodies, it is still difficult to communicate the need for professional understanding of computer ethics. And this is difficult, we believe, for multiple reasons. First, this has to do with education. Teaching computer ethics at the university level is not a top priority nor a general practice. And a survey conducted in 2022, for example, found out that only 2/3 of the institutions surveyed teach computer ethics as part of computer science curriculum, which means that 1/3 does not. And also computer ethics is often taught as a standalone subject, and the number of hours dedicated to it is often very limited, 10 hours or less per semester. The second issue we believe has to do with implementation. And implementing ethical guidelines is difficult because of the nature of those guidelines and principles, and also because of the specific environment and workflow in which software developers operate. And about the nature of AI principles, we see that guideline and self-assessment tools have multiplied in the last few years, which is something that makes it hard for software developers to identify a shared and universally recognized code of conduct. Also, AI ethical guidelines promote isolated principles. And this is because, as we just saw, in computer science curricula, ethics is taught as an add-on subject. And so developers who learn this attitude at the university then bring it to their workplaces. And finally, failing to implement AI ethical principles often lacks real consequences other than public outcry, which is something that reduces the incentive to adopt them. And also, like the other reason that I mentioned why it is difficult to implement these guidelines has to do with the specific environment in which software developers operate. And a central question that need to be answered is, at what stage do we need to implement these guidelines? At the level of the single person, the level of the project, or the level of the entire field? And this means to decide not just who is responsible in front of the public opinion or from a legal point of view, and instead it means that we need to break down the entire workflow and identify who and at what step is confronted with ethical issues, so as to provide them with tools tailored to their specific tasks and roles. So these are some of the main challenges that we face in use case 4. However, it is also true that there is a growing appetite among software developers for implementing ethical principles in their work. In 2022, the Institute for Human-Centered AI at Stanford University reported that, for example, topics like algorithmic fairness and biases are no more exclusive to the academic debate, but that, and I'm quoting from the survey, researchers with industry affiliation contributed 71% more publication and at ethics-focused conferences in recent years. So in use case 4, we want to take advantage of this growing interest and leverage the expertise of software developers to identify shortcomings in existing practices and to tackle concrete specific issues. So for us to involve software developers directly is crucial to translate complex cultural concepts and issues into technical recommendations. And this is because to develop ethical frameworks and software systems in isolation from each other would risk to underestimate crucial gaps and weaknesses. Also, use case 4 will involve around 12 software developers working in industry and in academia. And this is because we believe that it is important to consider the different approaches across different sectors. Also, because we believe that higher education could and should play even a bigger role in advancing developers' ethical self-awareness. And so we wish that through our workshop, we can facilitate this conversation. At the moment, we are organizing our first workshop. This will be a 2.5 hour in-person workshop and will take place on October the 27th in Dublin at the Trinity Long Room Hub, which is at Trinity College Dublin. Here you can see the flyer for the event. We are recruiting participants, so if you are a software developer based in Dublin and you are interested in discussing how to implement AI ethical principles in your work, please sign up for the event by visiting the KT4D website, or just feel free to contact me in the chat or by email afterwards. So during the workshop, we will explore the limits of current approaches to ethical AI development through conversations, examples, and co-creation activities. The first half of the workshop will be dedicated to reviewing existing tools and guidelines. Especially, we are interested in discussing questions around agency. So who is in charge of implementing these ethical principles and to what extent this is effective. And we also want to discuss support. So what people working in different roles think that is missing at the moment, and what tools they would like to see. During the second half of the workshop, participants will be divided into groups for a co-creation activity, during which they will engage with a real-life scenario and develop a prototype for a tool to assess the ethical impact of their work. And this will give the participants the opportunity to consider their own ethical practices and the state of their field in a very concrete way, and through the process of creating something together. And this is all from me and from use case 4. I look forward to the discussion, and I hope to see some of you in Dublin for our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleonora. That was wonderful to see how that is all coming together. So we've now come to the part in the webinar when we can take a few of your questions. And I'm just going to ask all my colleagues to come back onto their cameras. And I guess I'll cue a few of them that we have here. And I might start, Andres, with yourself, because there was a couple of questions towards your presentation. First of all, one about that stage 3, about after you've given your participants the chance to see some of these educational material, what will they do? What does the co-creation consist of?
Hi, very happy to answer these questions. So the answer to that, I think my colleagues from IRMIR, my colleague Bogna, can answer better, because this hasn't been, let's say, this methodology we presented you is not something that we design unilaterally, but we design collaboratively. So from their sides, due to their great expertise in citizen science, it's been them who've been in charge of designing this part of the methodology, also to put it in practice in the pilot rounds in Krakow that they've done recently. So I can tell something about that, but if Bogna would like to answer this question, I'll be more happy.
Yeah, Bogna, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yes, and maybe I will combine with another question that was addressed to me about the methodological approach. So putting all together, well, we rely very much on our practical experience that we have, apart from, of course, conceptual and theoretical framework. And I would say that this is not just a citizen science approach, but it's also a simply applied social science approach. So I mean, like Leger or Mason works. But anyway, we add to that our practical experience. So since 2018, I guess, we have been involved in citizen science projects. Like, for example, we did for Poland something which was about designing together with the citizens of various urban areas, functional areas, which means basically cities in Poland, a long-term strategy of economic and social development. So we had 3,000 plus, I would say, responses, but it's not that much about responses, because it's not just a survey-based approach only, but citizen science requires contribution of various citizens in various forms, like collecting data with us, like co-designing and co-creation when we are talking about policy making, when we want to design a certain policy making model. So yes, citizens are involved together with us in this process. And so that was one huge research that we've been doing in Poland, and plus another experience in the Horizon project, in which we tried to check whether citizen science helps changes trust that people might have in expertise and experts in science. So anyway, well, we use mixed methods. It means that we are using, if possible, we mix survey together with focus, with qualitative approach, plus try to look for interactivity, various interactivity modes, how we can actually do it together with citizens, like those workshops. Well, and I think that if we want to discuss it in very specific and detailed methodological way, probably it's not the time for that. But well, I can of course share with you some references to the materials that we produce, most the articles that we've written on the basis of our experiences, as well as I can also make some references to some conceptual framework that we use in order to shape it. But anyway, it's not a one author or one approach, one path, one methodological path. Well, we need to combine. Thank you.
Absolutely.
If I may add something to
yes, please
this,
go
like
ahead,
very
Andres.
shortly.
Yeah.
It's just to give perhaps an idea of how could it look like. It is collaborative design, sort of. So what we pretend is to mock up the format of the games and the concepts of the games together in not let's say theoretical discussion way, but also putting these ideas into drawings, into text, into boxes. So just to envision an interface, just to envision a way in which you can see the materials. This is to give the technical team of the KT4D consortium some material, some actual, let's say, cardboards with things written, so they can grip to something at the time of developing, not just to, let's say, rely on the spoken communication or to communicate through documents. That sometimes is not the best, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, Andres. And I think that's an important thing to draw out. Yeah, there's some great responses in the chat, but given that we only have 1 minute left, I wanted to just go to Alan Whiteside's question in the Q&A about how the outcomes of the workshops align to create a shared understanding of AI ethics. And I think that's a really important question for us in the project, because while on some level we respect the fact that different kinds of actors in the AI ethics system will have different priorities, different languages, different levels of awareness, at the same time, it's important that the system works for all. So this is why we bring everything back to the center of the project. So the use cases are run by different partners, but of course we bring this all back and coordinate and consolidate that knowledge at the project level. And this is why it's interesting for us that while the first three are the first interaction of each of the use cases is focusing on slightly different kinds of questions, the second interaction will be all the same. We may focus it quite differently, but it'll be this digital democracy lab experience. And I hope we'll do a future webinar on that topic specifically, because I think this is going to be quite exciting and quite innovative, but also quite interesting to see how those differing perspectives on AI ethics can be drawn out from different groups and different players in the ecosystem in different ways. So I think that brings us to the hour. So I'll just kind of turn back over maybe to Joanne and say maybe some closing words or any follow-up that you want to instigate. But thank you everyone for participating today. It's been great to present this to you.
Thank you all for fabulous presentations. Those were excellent and really interesting, even if I am involved in the project myself. Also, I'm really delighted. People have been sharing incredible resources in the chat. So I want to say we have a contact form on our website. If you have something relevant, please send it to us. Also, if you have something that you want us to promote on your behalf, we're really interested in working collaboratively. And thank you all for attending today. It's made today such a success. And yeah, thank you, everyone. I think that's all I want to say.
Then I guess with that we'll close. So thank you everyone for your time. And again, please follow us and we'll hopefully see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.